Hey everybody, and welcome to this, I wanted to do a video on the Man United Crystal Palace game from, yesterday as I record this video, so from Saturday the 19th of September, because I think it was a really interesting game, and I've watched a lot of reaction to it, and everyone seems to be talking about Man United, and their faults and their issues, and not a lot of credit going to Palace, I will say. I say this as a Palace fan, but I wanted to kind of give my take on it, I think, and especially the issues, I think, at Man United that they have as a club. But first off, let's talk about the game. So, obviously it ended 3-1 to Crystal Palace. Palace went 2 up, had one brought back by Donny van de Beek on his debut, and then kind of settled it in the 85th minute. Will Sahar, man of the match. I don't think anybody could probably argue with that. He was excellent. Stats wise, Palace possession, you can see, is not Palace's strong point. It's not what they aim to do, but you can see the shots are pretty even, and if you watch the game, I will confess to not having watched the entire game. I listened to it on the radio on the way home from work, and I have quite a long journey home, so I managed to listen to the whole match, and then I watched the highlights on Match of the Day twice because I enjoyed it so much. There really wasn't a lot going on for Man United. There was a couple of chances, definitely. I think Greenwood had a fairly good chance from a header, but in reality, Palace could have had 3 more. If Andre Ayew had his scoring boots on, they would have had 3 more, I think. It was a terrible performance from Man United, but when we say terrible performance from Man United, I think there is also credit to Palace for making them look bad as well. Palace put in a really, really good performance, a total team performance. You can see 24 tackles, 33 clearances. They just stopped Man United playing football. They gave them no time. The midfield pairing in Palace's kind of midfield of McCarthy and MacArthur, I know it's confusing with those two, were incredible, and they just mopped everything up. And at the back, Koyata and Sacco had excellent games. Joel Ward is probably, if not the most underrated Palace player that there has been in the last sort of 10 years, possibly one of the most underrated Premier League players there's been in the last sort of 6 or 7 years, because he's been so solid. Like, he is a guy who last season lost his place to, not last season, actually season before, sorry, lost his place to Wan-Bissaka, who ironically plays at Man United now, and he could have been like, okay, that's me done, time to move on, but he didn't. He stuck with the club again. Last season we didn't sign a replacement, and Joel Ward did a great job, and this season we have signed a replacement technically in Nathan Ferguson, but he still continues to just go out there and do a really good job. And Tyreek Mitchell on the left back is looking like another fantastic prospect who just looks totally at home in the Premier League, which is great. I don't know if he'll keep his position when Patrick Van Aanholt comes back, but he's one for the future. And Van Aanholt's not getting that much younger. I think he's 30 now, so good to look. But anyway, I digress. When you look at those two lineups, you see a Crystal Palace team who, I would say, in pretty much every single position, there is a better, technically on paper, Man United player. I'd argue the goalkeepers, potentially. I actually think I would take him over De Gea, to be completely honest with you. And I would take Wilf over anyone in the Man United team. And I say Wilf, I mean Wilf on this form. Wilf Sahar is a confidence form player, and when he is in that confidence and has that form, he is one of the most electric players, I think, in the Premier League. And his unfortunate problem, and probably the reason why a lot of top clubs haven't signed him, is his consistency is not quite there. He can fade out for periods of games. I don't mean as in sections of games. I mean like for whole 3, 4, 5 games, he can just kind of fade a little bit before he comes back. So, but I would, on this form, I'd take Wolf over any of those Man United players. But otherwise, you would look on paper and go, you know, none of those Palace players would make it into that Man United team. But this isn't FIFA. This isn't FIFA Ultimate Team. This is real life football. Real life football is a team game, and what Crystal Palace have over Man United was a much better team. And people think that a team is a collection of individuals. It isn't. It is those individuals, but it's them working together. And top football is tactically. You have to get your tactics right. You have to play. You have to practice those tactics and get it worked down. And Roy Hodgson's the master of that. Like, in terms of drilling tactics into players and getting an organised team, he's done it everywhere he's gone. I will say that people always bring up his Liverpool time. I think the biggest issue with Liverpool was they wanted to play a different way, and that wasn't the way Roy Hodgson will go. Roy Hodgson has his limitations. He's never going to play free-flowing, attacking football like Pep Guardiola. It's or Klopp or someone like that. It's never going to happen with him. He has his set way of playing, which he has stuck with for the majority of a very successful career. But if those players buy into that, and if he gets the right players for that team, much like Marcelo Bielsa, to be honest with you, you see Bielsa in Leeds and you go, they are greater than the sum of their parts. And Crystal Palace are greater than the sum of their parts. They just fight and fight and fight, and they are so disciplined. It's an incredible thing to watch sometimes. I get as much enjoyment about watching those kind of two banks of four, just act like, the castle walls, as I do from, watching a nice passing move, that Man City might do or something like that. There's a beauty in that. Defending is, to some extent, a lost art nowadays. It's not cool, it's not fashionable. It's not what FIFA does. It's all about the strikers, the scoring, the goals, the crossfield passes, the volleys, the shooting outside the area. That's what football's all about, the highlights, But the reality of the matter is the 90 minutes that you have on that football pitch in real life, not your 5-minute games of FIFA. The real life, it's about defending, Teams win leagues with defences. Not for 1 second suggesting Palace are going to win the league. What I'm saying is that when you look at the teams who have won the leagues over the year, it is the defence. Sure, things are changing. The top teams now have these wing backs which are more like midfielders, or full-backs, more like midfielders, but they still have to have great defensive, great goalkeepers, great defences, well-drilled defences. We've seen Man City come unstuck at the highest level because their defence has not been right. And it's been a criticism of them. They've had this wonderful attack with so many choices and options, but defensively they've never quite managed to get it right. Even in their kind of record-breaking seasons, they've always looked a little bit shaky every now and then. Liverpool last season, for the most part, were brilliant defensively. If you look back on the Manchester United dynasty, what that was built upon was defence. They had some of the best defenders probably the world has seen, in times. The Vidic-Ferdinand partnership was legendary. They had some of the best goalkeepers you saw. Fullbacks as well. They had brilliant players. And it was always something that Sir Alex Ferguson would strengthen and make sure you had that defence right. And if he didn't feel it was right, he'd go out and buy a player, which was right. What we see with Man United now, and I think it's a danger, I see it with Chelsea, I see it with a lot of sides, is the transfers that excite fans. And I'm not really talking about the fans who go and watch the games every week. I'm not talking about the fans in the stadium. I'm not talking about the ones that excite, the one that gets the social media going are always the strikers. That's why this Sancho deal with Man United is so exciting for Man United, worldwide fans. I'm talking about England, but I'm talking about across the world as well, because it's like, wow, Jadon Sancho, I can't wait to watch the highlights of him, or I can't wait to play as him on FIFA. But the reality is, Man United are never going to win the league with the defence they put out yesterday. It's not going to happen. They were torn apart by, as I said, what is a fantastic team, but the reality is, Jordan Ayew looked pretty rubbish the whole game. He missed a lot of chances, and yet we still absolutely put them to the sword. Whatever you want to say about they hadn't had as much, time leading into the game, pre-season issues, off the field issues, all this type of stuff. Every one of their problems is a problem that they've made themselves. So I don't believe in excuses when they could have solved those issues themselves. And we'll go into Man United and their issues and what they can do and what they are. But defences win leagues, defences win you trophies, and they don't have a very good one. Even in attack, they looked very, very blunt. Fernandes, I think Gary Neville said that Fernandes was their best defender. It's not really something you want, is it, from the player you paid 65 million for to create chances? You don't want him being your best defender. We saw Pogba put in a subpar performance again. I've made no kind of secret that I'm not the biggest Paul Pogba fan. I think he's very overrated. I think he's a FIFA player. I'll be honest, I think he has great games every now and then, but from a consistent point of view, he has never looked good apart from the time at Juventus, and he was, flanked by two incredibly experienced midfielders in a very well-drilled team. When it comes to him putting in the performances to drive a team forward, it's rare that he's ever done that for Man United. I don't doubt his talent. I just think from a perspective of his ability on the football pitch, it's not as a leader, it's not as somebody to drag the team forward and lead by example. It's I can be an excellent part of a good team, and I'll play well with great players around me playing well. But the reality is, I think that he has never really shown that he could drag Man United out of the out of the doldrums and bring them forward, by the scruff of the neck sort of thing, like some players can do. I don't feel like he's ever won a game on his own, almost in a Steven Gerrard-esque way, for Man United. But maybe I'm mistaken. But I don't feel like I get that from him. I don't doubt he's an extremely talented footballer. I just think that what Man United are expecting from him is not what Paul Pogba is, and that kind of doesn't really help them. I think Souness is kind of quite famous, Graham Souness, for attacking Paul Pogba, and while I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, I do think there is something to be said for, I don't want to say the attitude of Paul Pogba, because I don't feel it's that. I don't feel like he has a bad attitude to things. I think it's just his personality and his leadership, and he's not that guy, and that's okay. You don't have to have a team of 11, great leaders in there. When the Man United teams of old, you had 3 or 4 players in there who were great leaders, who could be captains, but you didn't have other players in there. What they did was those players would rally the other guys, and they would get the best out of them. And what you don't have at Man United, I think, at the minute, is anybody who's like that at all. You don't have any leaders there. We talked about it with Arsenal for years and years and years, that they didn't really have any leaders in midfield or people who would kind of drag them kicking and screaming and consistently put in those performances week in, week out. Whatever you want to say about Palace and their players, McCarthy, they put the effort in every single week. They rarely play below a 7 out of 10. They don't win all the games. They don't. Sometimes their skill hits a plateau that they're, not able, but they never stop running. They never stop giving you everything you've got. A guy like Jeff Schlupp, who, I don't know where Jeff Schlupp's best position is. I don't think he knows, but we play better when he's in that team. He just gives us something, and I don't know what it is, but every time I feel confident when I see Jeff Schlupp's name in the team sheet, because I'm like, this guy, he he's always there. He's always around. You know, he's a difficult player to kind of pin down. But yeah, and you know, in this game we saw Andros Townsend put Palace ahead. Palace started brilliantly. You know, I get. Actually, I don't get the argument of Man United being rusty. I don't get it. I didn't get at the beginning of the season when some teams looked rusty but some teams didn't. Because everybody's had the same amount of time. Whatever you want to say about Man United saying, well, they actually started a week later. Yes, but that's because they played later in the Europa League. So they've had the same pre-season as everyone else. But I didn't see... Palace didn't look as rusty as Man United did last week. It didn't take them one game to suddenly get up to speed. You know, Man United next week won't suddenly brush off all that rustiness and start playing free-flowing football. Like, that's not going to happen. There's deeper issues there. And you know, look at this bench. We've got, you know, Dean Henderson, who is a fantastic goalkeeper. You know, Fred was a 30-40 million pound player. Bally was like a 30 million pound player. Van der Beek's a 40 million pound player. Mason Greenwood is an academy player, but very highly thought of. Igalo, sure, was a kind of short-term guy, but worked out well. 40 million pounds in Wan-Bissaka. You know, we've got Martin Kelly, who we signed for a couple of million. Hennessy, who we signed for not very much at all. Innes is a youth player. Luca, I think we paid like maybe 15 for him. Max we got on a free. We paid 20 for Eze, and Michi we got on loan. When you probably look at this starting lineup here of how much we've paid for these players, apart from Sacco, we've never played more than, I think the next highest one might be Wilf, who was supposedly about 10 million, I think, from Man United. We brought him back, but I don't think it was actually that much. And otherwise, everyone else was really exceptionally cheap. I'm not going to say that you could buy the whole team there for one Paul Pogba, but a Pogba and a Fernandes, sure. And then that doesn't account for the £80 million Maguire, you know, and all that. So what am I getting at here? What I'm getting at is that, like, I feel like we're in an age of football where people think that if you assemble this team like you do on FIFA Ultimate Team, then that's it. That's what happens. And then you go and you win things. And if the team doesn't win things, then what you need to do is you need to get better players in to replace those players who aren't working. And that's what you do. You just keep replacing people until you have that ultimate team, you know? And I just think it's such bullshit. It's such utter bullshit that this whole transfer season I have just been honestly, it's made me hate football this kind of pre-season, because all I see are just every day is transfers and fans calling for their club to sign players, do this, do that. And I'm like, imagine if your employers treated you like that. Oh, what's that? You had a bad week this week, did you? For possibly reasons not even, you know, related to this, or possibly because, I've asked you to go and work in one section of this factory, but actually, you know, usually you work in the other, and it's taking you time to get used to it. Well, I'm sorry, but we're actually getting rid of you, and then we're bringing somebody else in to replace you, because, you know, we need to win. It's just such a weird concept. It's like, none of these Man United players, none of them are bad footballers. Absolutely none of them. But for whatever reason, none of them are performing to the level that they should be performing at. On paper, Man United should beat Crystal Palace. But the difference between the two teams, and what made that difference in quality, was the manager. So what Roy Hodgson has done for Crystal Palace is install this work ethic in them. He has this tactic down. He plays to the strengths of the team he has. He hasn't had a lot of money to spend over the last few seasons. This season we've spent okay. We've signed 3 good players, but the reality is one of them is on loan. One of them was kind of a free, although it's going to tribunal, and the other one was 20 million. You know, we're not talking mega bucks here, but compared to other seasons, we've actually spent okay. We buy bargain players. You know, That's what we do. We don't have the money to go out there and you know, buy the Jadon Sanchos or the Donny van der Beeks of this world, nor would they come to the club. But what we do is we get players who come in and they fit the manager's system. The players the manager wants and players he works with. And the other important thing is it's very rare at Crystal Palace that you have a player who comes in and it just fundamentally doesn't work and then they're gone. The only exception I would say would be Sorloth, who we signed and it didn't work, although weirdly we're now looking to sell him for more than we actually signed him for. It's a bizarre one, but apart from that I can't really think of many players who've come in at Crystal Palace in kind of Roy Hodgson's time who have not played some part in the team or who've just been kind of pushed out. Max Meyer potentially, although I don't know how much of that is down to him not fitting the club much, not quite working out there, or whether for whatever reason. But otherwise, you know, a lot of the players we signed, these kind of budget players, you know, Czech Coyote, for example, he's come in and done a great job. Jordan Ayew, you know, signed him on a very minimal amount of money and done brilliantly. Gaeta, we knew the goalkeeper and we went out there and got him on a free, and he's been brilliant for us. He's been absolutely brilliant. It's rare, but at Man United I see players come in and after a week they're gone. You know, Harry Maguire, people are saying to get rid of him. You know, it's £80 million flop. What sort of a club can just write off a player for 80 million? And by the way, Harry Maguire's not a bad footballer. Like, he's a good defender. The problem is the systems. The problem is the training. The problem is the whole setup of the club. Palace have made great strides in recent years. We now have a Category 1 youth setup. We've completely redone the training ground. It looks brilliant. We're going to work on the stadium next. Sellers Park is, by all accounts, a complete shithole. And you're getting a new stand. You know, things are happening at the football club. We're using our Premier League money wisely. We're investing in the team. We're not a rich club by any means. We don't have rich owners. Our chairman is by no means rich, but what he is a businessman and a clever one. But he's also a fan of the football club. He wants the club to do well. He's not an idiot who is trying to balance books all the time or work on, you know, how the commercial aspects of Palace is. He knows that the important thing for Crystal Palace is to stay in the Premier League, and he knows that he has to buy smartly. They've addressed the fact that we had one of the oldest squads in the league by buying younger players, and are possibly continuing to do so. They're looking like a smart club. You know, they're a club who I feel proud to support because I think what they're doing, you know, they've been brilliant in the way they've built up. The club that came up to Premier League to the club now is almost unrecognisable in that sense. But Man United have just declined. And while I don't think the blame completely lies at Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, I don't think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and I never have felt that he was the man to bring Man United back to the glory days. My opinion on him is that tactically he is completely out of his depth. He never seems to really know what he's doing. He never seems to be able to affect a game with a substitute. You know, he played Dan James, brought him off after 45 minutes for Greenwood. I don't know why he was playing Dan James over Greenwood. If it was because of the incidents with Greenwood in the England squad, or the subsequent kind of newspaper issues, why are you bringing him on at 45 minutes? It's almost like a desperate move of like, oh shit, you know, actually we do need you, Mason. Sorry, yeah, you know, get dressed. You know, he took Pogba off after 67, which is fine, you know. And he took Mensah off at 81 and brought on a striker. It's just like, this is fine. But like, I don't know how Man United play. Like, I just don't know. I don't know how what style do you think they have? Like, I can go through most of the clubs in the Premier League and go, okay, we know how Liverpool play. We know how Man City play. We kind of know how Chelsea are trying to play. They've obviously got a lot of new players, but we know how Frank wants to play there. We know how Spurs play, especially with Mourinho. We know how Leicester play. We know how Sheffield United. I can go through the Premier League. You know how these teams play. You know how they want to set up. Brighton, they have identities. Palace, we know exactly how they're going to play. There's no surprise in this team in the way it plays. Man United, I don't know what they're trying to do. Are they trying to be a counter-attacking team? Are they trying to be a possession-based team? Are they? I don't know what they're trying to do. They have no identity in the team. And yeah, it's funny. The other issue I think is, I kind of said the whole setup, but I feel from a pre-season point of view, like, discipline I think is a huge issue at Man United, from what I can see. We had the Harry Maguire incident, and whatever people want to say about the incident, I don't understand why footballers went on holiday. Can someone explain this to me? Because for me, their season ended. I don't think I'll have it here. I don't think it will go back, but hang on, it will do actually. So the season ended on the 26th of July. Now Man United played a little bit longer, and then their season started kind of mid-September. So you had like 5-6 weeks of pre-season. I don't understand why these players went abroad, especially firstly right now when there's a pandemic on, and surely the clubs would want their players to be at home or somewhere quote unquote safer perhaps than going abroad, somewhere where they know that there's going to be high level safety measures in place, because players contracting COVID-19, not only from, perhaps there's not as much issues or danger towards those players because they're very fit young individuals, but from a point of view of, that means that they can't do anything for 2 weeks at least. I don't know why these players were going abroad. I don't know if I think some Palace players did go abroad, judging from Instagram and stuff like that. And so I'm not singling out Man United as your players, but I do struggle to understand why these players were going abroad. And people might try to say, well, you know what, players are human beings, they deserve a holiday and stuff like that. And I don't deny that. I just don't know why they had to go abroad to do the holiday. I don't know why they had to go out partying. And I get they're young players, but they're also, this is, for want of not having a better word, unprecedented times. And maybe if I was a footballer, I think I would have turned around and been like, you know what, there's lots of things happening right now, and the football season starts in a few weeks. We're going to have friendlies in probably a couple of weeks' time. There's a lot of training. I'm just going to keep myself fit. I'm not going to go in for training for a couple of weeks or whatever, but I'm not going to use that time to go partying abroad. Like, especially, with Man United, they had nothing to celebrate. If you got to the end of a long season, like Liverpool players, something like that, I could kind of understand it. It's like, this has been a hard season. We've won the league or whatever. Let's go and enjoy a week abroad. But Man United, I'd be like, I want to get back into the gym, get training and get going. So I find it bizarre that Harry Maguire was even abroad anyway, to be completely honest with you. But listen, that's me. Some people might say that's it's fine and there's no harm there. But then you get to the point of saying, well, Man United were rusty because this was their first week they played. But I'm sorry, they organise their friendlies. They organise their training sessions. They organise everything like that. It's only one game. Crystal Palace played one more game than them. It's Man United's fault. It's nothing to do with the fixtures. It's Man United's fault. And when you say Man United, I look at Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, because he should be the guy who is dictating, this is when we come back from pre-season, this is when the first training session is, this is how we're going to play our pre-season, these are the friendlies we're going to play, this is the way we're going to get back to fitness. And he does that in conjunction with his whole fitness team. They should be having meetings, sitting down. So either the problem is that his team is not good enough and he's getting bad advice. I don't expect Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to be, on top of sports science. He obviously should have a good knowledge of it, but I don't expect him to be, number one. But he should have people who are. And if they're not, if the players are reporting back and yeah, or if he's going into his first game of the season and those players are not fit and they're not ready to play, they're rusty, they're unfit, then in my opinion, like, either they hold their hands up and go, you know what, we got our pre-season wrong, we've learned from it, or they need to find some replacements for the people who, because they're not doing their job properly. So I think tactically he's looked inept in the Premier League. They have no way of playing. It's a collection of players. It's almost like they're trying to do a Real Madrid, but without good enough players. They have very good players, but they're not the Galacticos of Real Madrid. You know, they don't have a Ronaldo there to propel them through, or a Ramos at the back to kind of organise the team. You know, it seems like their pre-season has been a complete disaster. And then the discipline issue. So you have Maguire in Greece, obviously, discipline. You have the Greenwood stuff. And you might say, well, you know what? That's not Ollie's fault. He's not in control of his players when they're on international duty, or this or that. I disagree. He sets the disciplinary standards at the club. And if the standards at the club are to the highest level and the expectation of the players is at the highest level, then they don't go abroad and fuck up, because they know the consequences when they get back. When you look at Alex Ferguson, he, sometimes to extreme points, he was completely in control of his players. And I don't think Ryan Giggs would have been the Ryan Giggs we know if it wasn't for Sir Alex Ferguson, because Ferguson would literally turn up to parties that Giggs was at. He would get tip-offs about it. He would turn up parties and drag them out. You know, him, Lee Sharp, other players. You know, you can read all about it in the books. It's crazy. He set that disciplinary standard along with senior players, you know, like Keane, etc. They set the standards at that club to say, this is Man United, and this is the standards we expect. This isn't another club here. This isn't a party. This isn't, you know, sing along at the local bar. This is Man United, and we win things. And this seems to be the problem. I think the discipline has just gone out the window. There doesn't feel like there's ambition. It's players coasting along going, yeah, look, we play for Man United. Oh, I'm so good. And there just feels like there's no winning mentality at the football club anymore. And I think it's an issue. Like, it's a real issue. And I don't see that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is the guy who's going to turn this around. He's had time at the club, and I feel what happened with Solskjaer, this is how I read it, has happened at the club, is Solskjaer came in as a caretaker manager, and I think they only ever saw him as a caretaker manager, try to get the fans back on board by bringing in this legend, you know, at the club as a manager after, you know, disastrous times with Mourinho. And everything was very sour, and try and get feel good back. And Ollie won a few games. They were like, oh, this is good. And then they got to the end of the season, they went, yeah, actually, I don't think we haven't got anybody else lined up. And if we just get rid of Ollie, like, that's suddenly the fans will come back at us again, because they love Ollie now. But I also feel like they were never convinced by him, so they never really backed him in the transfer market. They never felt like he was building this team, or he had this idea of the way they want to play. Like, Mikel Arteta at Arsenal, well, I don't think Arsenal played well at all against West Ham. I'll save that for my main video. This one's just about Man Utd Crystal Palace. They have a set way to play. You can see he's changed stuff at the club. Arsenal feels different now from what he's done at the football club. And I don't feel like that with Man United at all with Ollie. I feel like it's got worse. So I think the problem was the board never brought into Ollie as much as they would have liked. I think they thought, we'll keep him on. If it doesn't work out, we'll get another manager in. But at least we gave him a chance. At least the fans can't say we did give him a chance. And then they never really backed him in the transfer market. They got Bruno in January, and it changed the season. And you're like, if they've had him at the beginning, would that have been a bit better? But maybe not. I don't know. But they managed to get into the Champions League, which I think that the board were like, okay, well, this we're building on something here. We finished the season quite well. But again, I still feel like They're not committed to Ollie. The Jadon Sancho thing is prime example of this. I think if Man United had a manager the ilk of Klopp, of Pep, someone like that, a real massive name, they would have brought Jadon Sancho, because that manager would have turned around and said, I want Sancho before the beginning of the game of the season. Get him now. I don't care if we lose £10 million in the negotiation. We're Manchester United. Get the player. Sir Alex Ferguson would have said that 100%. 100%. They would. If Sir Alex Ferguson was still in charge of Man United, they would have signed Jadon Sancho by now. He would have been in that boardroom, ripping throats out, like, get me that player now. That's the one I need. And they probably would have signed a centre back as well, and possibly a defensive midfielder. But anyway, and they would have been more ruthless on the players getting out the team. You know, Rashford, I like Rashford a lot. He has not played with any sort of good form for a while now. I worry he's going to turn into another Lingard. I think what he does off the pitch, he is an absolute credit to footballers. He has been incredible in that way. But something is not happening for him on the pitch. It's not working for him. And he's regressed. He has regressed under Ollie, without a doubt. That's worrying when you see players who were playing better under previous managers than they are currently. So, for me, the way Man United fix this is they need to bring in a new manager, someone with a philosophy that is going to fit the way the club wants to play. It's no good bringing in Jose Mourinho. Yes, he might win things, but that's not the way you want your football club to play football. Pochettino springs to mind. Again, I think the worry there is that Pochettino hasn't won anything. The other issue is that a lot of the biggest managers in the world with those kind of definitive ways of playing and that winning mentality actually already have jobs, and they're not going to go to Man United. But also I think that there's you need to sometimes look a little bit left field on things as well. You know, the RB Leipzig manager is a guy who has a clear way of playing. Southampton's manager, Hasenhüttl, again, these kind of clear philosophies of ways of play. I worry that Man United, you know, from a job point of view, might not be there, and whatever happens, the board needs to back that manager, and they need to back them not just in the way of money, but in the way of the culture of the club. Like, the culture of the club needs to change. It has to be about the football first. It can't be about the business side first. It can't be any of that stuff. It has to be about getting Man United winning trophies again, because the commercial, that's where all that commercial stuff comes from. That's why they're making money, because of the successful reign of Sir Alex Ferguson. When Sir Alex Ferguson was in charge of the football club, he had complete control over the football side of things. Nothing happened without his say. Nothing. You know, I know it feels like those times have kind of gone where you now have directors of football, etc., this type of stuff, but I think Arsenal have kind of gone back to that route. They've made Mikel Arteta manager instead of head coach. And I think a lot of clubs are kind of going back into this, where it's like, directors of football, where does it work? Like, honestly, where does it work? Unless you have a partnership where the two people are completely in agreement with the way forward in the football club, which is very rare. I don't know that it really works. I just think that there are people out there who Man United can get who are much better than Solskjaer. And they need to really think about that. It's too late now. Like, the chance, it ends in 10 days, the transfer window. They might sign Sancho. They'll probably get Champions League again, perhaps. They need to get a lot better, but they might do. But they're not going to win anything. They're not going to win anything with that defence. It got torn apart by Crystal Palace. I'm a Crystal Palace fan, and that it got torn apart. Now, I will say that the penalty, in my opinion, whatever you want to say about letter of the law dictates that should be a penalty, blah, blah, blah. I would never give that as a penalty. I also feel that, while again, the encroachment from De Gea by letter of the law means it should get retaken, I would never have that. It feels ridiculous to me. It obviously benefited Crystal Palace. I tenderly believe we would have won the game anyway. Like 100% believe we would have won the game anyway. I didn't think Man United looked like they were coming back into it. Van der Beek's goal was a scrappy one which deflected off one of our players and landed in his path, and he just kind of dinked it in. Like, it didn't, to me, turn around and go, "Whoa, look at Donny van der Beek. He's the guy who, can turn the game around." It was like he just happened to be in the right place at the right time, from a deflection, and he poked it in. That happens, but I feel like they would have lost the game anyway. So I think while people will talk about the penalty decision, for me it doesn't change anything. But yeah, as I said, I just think like the discipline's fallen away at Man United, the ambition, the drive. There isn't the leaders at the club that they need. Like, you bring in Donny van der Beek, who's a fine midfielder, and everyone says this. He's a great midfielder, Donny van der Beek. Really, really good. Oh, on FIFA he's like 85 or whatever the heck he is. I don't know. 40 million, that's a bargain for a young midfielder. He's going to be great. But they don't need him. What they need is someone so they don't have to play Scott McTominay in a defensive midfield role. They need that leader. They need Roy Keane. That's what they need. They need that type of player there. They don't need Timothy Fosu-Mensah. Now, Aaron Wan-Bissaka is clearly the number one. He's a forward here, if you see. It's interesting, isn't it? He's a forward here, Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Now, he is clearly the better right back than Fosu-Mensah. But again, he's not a leader. I don't think the match would have changed if Wan-Bissaka had played. Like, he's not a leader to bring forward. Maguire, you could argue, might be, but I don't really think he is that much, to be honest. His partnership with Lindelof is not very good. Bruno, in a way, is a kind of leader. Like, he leads by example, I think, and has been a great player for them. But as I said, they do need that player who's just going to get them up and get them going. And they just felt so flat. It was a really poor performance from them. Really, really poor. And again, it's not something where I'm going, this is a one-off. Like, we beat them at Old Trafford last season. I think we got a draw the season before. It's, they're definitely not a title challenging side, which people thought they would be this season. Even if you had Jadon Sancho in the team, I don't think it changes the result today, because he wouldn't have gotten the ball. They were just pushed back. They couldn't break through the two banks of four. Jadon Sancho's not going to change that. He's not going to hit you on the break. There is no break. Crystal Palace defended. Like, that's not the player you need right now. What they need is to have a solid back four they can rely on, so that when they get hit on the break, or when their team's attacking, they don't. Every time Crystal Palace attacked, it felt like they were going to score. That's absolutely shocking. That's the type of stuff that Fulham and West Brom have, or Leeds, without any of the positives from Leeds. It just honestly felt like every time Palace attacked, it felt like there was going to be a goal. De Gea seems to have been, I don't know what happened to him, but he seems to have lost it. Whether he's just been a goalkeeper in a back four of just shakiness for too long, and he's maybe lost confidence there or something, I don't know. But maybe Henderson coming in would not be a bad thing. But again, Henderson's not going to change that defence. Henderson being in goal would not have changed the result today. Townsend would still have scored. Zaha would still have scored at the end. probably would have still conceded the penalty. Maybe he wouldn't have come off his line or whatever, and it was a shit penalty by Ayew. He hasn't looked great this season. I have him in my fantasy team, actually, funny enough. And he did technically get an assist, I think, for the penalty, weirdly. But I will be swapping him out, though. I think Batshuayi is the way forward for Palace. Palace, for me, I'm really excited by them because I think we have such a good basis. Then we have these players like Essie and Batshuayi, and potentially a couple more coming in who can really add a bit of fire, and we've needed that because we've relied on Will for too long, and we need other dangers in the side to continue to move forward. We've won our first 2 games of the season. We're third in the Premier League at the minute. It's ridiculous. It means nothing right now, but for me, I'm looking at our team and going, well, you know what? If we hadn't have had the break, I feel like we would have finished around here. We were well on before the season break to push for that kind of 7th place position, and we had a terrible run when we came back. And it fascinates me that a lot of people picked up on Palace to get relegated this season. I'm fascinated by this concept of like, how on earth you're saying that out of the 20 teams in the Premier League, Palace are one of the worst 3. Like, fascinating. But anyway, I don't begrudge people for saying I think Palace will finish in the bottom half of the league, because I think we had a terrible run at the end of last season. Whatever the reasons for that were, I don't want to be that guy, but we did have a lot of injuries. We still do have a lot of injuries. We're playing Czech Coyote at centre-back. He's a midfielder. Like, we have a lot of injuries. We have a lot of players. We're playing, Ward at right back again when Ferguson's still injured. We're playing Tyreek Mitchell, an academy graduate, at left back because Van Aanholt's injured. Like, that back 4 where we just played against Man United and we held out against them and didn't give them a sniff, basically, apart from the goal they scored. It could be fair to say that back 4 that we have, none of them are first choice. Sacco might be one of our record signings, but he's not first choice at the minute. I think probably Tompkins and Cahill would be first choice centre backs. Ferguson is probably first choice right back, and Van Aanholt's first choice left back, and they're all injured. Apart from maybe Wan-Bissaka there, they had what would be their first choice defence out. So I think it's a really telling kind of thing that's the other thing, like as I said, about when Palace bring players in. When we move Coyote back to centre back, Sacco comes in. He wasn't ready to start last game. I think Dan must have got injured because he had a great game last time and he wasn't even on the bench this time. Like, the players they're ready and they slot into it. They know the system so well that they just slot into the position they go into. When we have players come back from injury, they slot back in really well, and you don't get that at Man United. I just think people don't know what they're doing at Man United. Like, there's no system. I think Ollie's just like, yeah, best of luck, lads, out you go. Feels like that's it, and that's not. I'm not saying you need to be the Marco Bielsa level where you have every single statistic ever and he watches so much like video analysis. He has so much analysis on games. I feel like, that can keep death by analysis almost. But the drilling on the training ground, that Hodgson does, I guarantee they're not doing that at Man United. Like, people say that was one of the reasons at Liverpool they got bored with the training. I think it wasn't what they were used to. They felt like they were kind of bigger stars than that. But when Hodgson's been at teams where he's perhaps not had the best players, but he's had very committed and dedicated players. I'm looking at Fulham, especially as an example. He's been able to just drill those teams. Drill. Blackburn he did pretty well at as well. He just drills the team to a point where they could play like that in the dark. You could turn the floodlights out and Palace would be able to play. They'd know where the other players were. They know who's going to be making a run. and I don't get that at all with Man United. And sometimes, yeah, I'm not all for that. Like, it does sometimes stifle the creativity, but he does also, Hodgson, seem to be adapting slightly to the players he's got and letting them be a little bit more free flow, especially with Wilf, and he's getting the results from that as well. And with Eze coming in, who I think is another player kind of like Wilf, and supposedly supposed to be getting Benrahma from Brentford as well. These more kind of flair type players, I think he will adapt to that like naturally, but they'll still have that rigid core going forward, and that's a very dangerous team to play when you have that. That's not a team you want to play. No one wants to play Crystal Palace. You're in for it there. We don't rely on the individual brilliance of players. We do have players capable of it, like Wilf. Even Townsend has been pretty good these last 2 games. But what we rely on is that team ethic, and that's what Man United just don't have. They just don't have it. It's difficult to bring it in, Roy Hodgson's 72. He's managed for more years than I've been alive for. Unbelievably. He's managed all over the world. There's a reason why he's done that. People write him off. People absolutely write Roy Hodgson off as some sort of football dinosaur. But listen, if he's a dinosaur, he's a fucking T-Rex, because he will absolutely destroy teams. If you come in underprepared, his teams will destroy you. And we saw that with Crystal Palace, there. In terms of what they've got kind of next coming up, that's a weird way to do the fixtures. Let's go back to the Fantasy Premier League, and then we can see, actually. It's a bit easier, I think. It cost some decent points from the game as well. Happy I've been choosing Zaha. Man United got Brighton next at home. That's a tough one for them. I really feel that's a tough one, because Brighton, again, a very well-drilled side. I'm going to be very interested to see how they do this week. Thought they were actually quite unlucky against Chelsea with that 3-1. This week they're playing Newcastle. I think we'll learn a lot more about Brighton there, because Newcastle looked pretty solid as well. So I'm really interested to see that game. It's actually on at 2 o'clock today. And then Palace play Everton, which I think will be a real humdinger, because the Everton game, and I'll talk about this in my roundup on Tuesday, but Everton, I saw a lot of really good things from them and a lot of really bad things from them. So I'm really interested to see. They weren't as good as 5-2 makes out. West Brom were pretty bad defensively and were down to 10 men for the entire second half. So I think Everton is still a work in progress, but I wonder how that Palace Everton game is going to go. It's on Prime, so I'll actually be able to watch it. I don't have a Sky Sports or BT Sports subscription because I can't really afford it at the minute, but also I can't really afford it from a double point of view of time to sit down and actually be worth watching, the matches and stuff like that. So I haven't at the minute. It might change at some point, but we'll see. But yeah, I wanted to give my thoughts on the match because I thought it was really interesting. And also I've been kind of a bit pissed off with a lot of people like saying that, like, oh, Man United played bad, or they let Palace win this game, blah blah blah, when I think Man United on their best would have struggled against that Palace team, because that was Palace at their best, without a doubt. Not quite at their best, because Ayew, I think, had a pretty bad game, but that was close to Crystal Palace's best, I think, and I think a Man United at their best probably could have got a result against Palace at their best, but I think if we continue to play like that, we're going to be a pain for a lot of sides this season, and we're going to be nowhere near the relegation zone. But yeah, till next time, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.